Maybe I'll start podcasts like this from now on. Because the Rodecaster Pro has arrived. You know, there was a podcast device I introduced 8 months ago. I said it was the only one in the world. It still maintains its uniqueness. It's a very unique device anyway. Along with this, the pod microphone has arrived. We connected everything together with its stand. And for a quality broadcast, because you are on a sound recording technologies channel, you deserve the best sound. Of course, I know that in the future, as much as possible, you also deserve the best in visuals. I am working on that too, of course. I will try to prepare a program in series. Now, I want to talk to you, not about the introduction of this device, or these gadgets, microphones, but really about a podcast flow. I want to provide you with information. Podcast now. Flow, it's not really about what it is, how it's done, or what is recorded. When recording a podcast, I'm talking about a workflow. I will talk about what we will record, how we will proceed, how we will share, and the details we need to do in between, the details we need to add or remove. Not sitting down in a technical sense to discuss which microphones, which devices, which cables. This is about a broadcast we have prepared or plan to prepare. I will try to present the workflow to you. Now, in my previous videos, by the way, I have also taken my notes. In previous videos, I have mentioned it in a few videos. I would like to mention it here as well. First of all, what was a podcast? I would like to talk about this. The exact text I mentioned in the video was this. Podcasts are the episodes of a program that you can find on the internet. Podcasts usually consist of original audio or video recordings. However, they can also be recorded broadcasts of a television or radio program, a lecture, a performance, or there may also be recorded broadcasts of another event. So, almost any series that can be watched later can be presented to us as a podcast broadcast. Of course, I mentioned that you can also present them. Now, you might have broadcasts that you have prepared beforehand. You might have broadcasts that you plan to prepare, but this can also be just audio content. Why is that? We mentioned it before. Some people have a phobia of the camera. They don't want to be seen, or they might not think they present a good image. But here, of course, you have to dress properly. Adjust the lights and make sure the surroundings don't look cluttered or messy so as not to disrespect the audience. By freeing ourselves from this situation, we can quickly create our content with just our microphone, audio recording device, and of course, our notes. As you know, in the world and recently in Turkey, people have started to both participate in and listen to podcasts very actively. In fact, they've been around for years. Of course, podcasts have been in our country, but we can say that the production and listening activities have just started to flourish. Now, in this episode, I want to explain a workflow. So, when creating a podcast, what kind of? I have prepared notes for you about the step-by-step process and the progress we will go through. Step by step. Now, let's say we have a podcast idea. Now, you can produce content on any topic that comes to mind. From fishing to sports, from social media to cryptocurrency exchanges, from sports to electronic devices. You can talk about your own life if you want, share funny stories that happen to you. This can be any content you can prepare as a series. Of course, I want to talk about a flow for this. Let's proceed step by step from the notes I've taken. If you want, first of all, who are we addressing? Which audience is our listener? We need to decide on this. To the youth, or to all age groups, to those who want to learn French, to athletes, to healthcare workers, or to everyone we can address and reach with ourselves. We need to set the boundaries for this, so that we can be more stable. Let's do our work in a more fluent way. Of course, after this, it doesn't always have to be a podcast that we do. Of course. Which question are we answering? I mean, do we want to inform people? Do we want to entertain? Do we want them to travel easily from one place to another, have fun where they go, and not have any issues with accommodation. Because what was it? It was a series of episodes available on the internet. Podcast. We need to pay attention to this while creating our content. And we said, what are we answering? The question of how we answer is also very important. Are we using our own experiences or our academic knowledge to inform someone who wants to learn? A friend of ours mentioned it. My cousin talked about it. Is this what we're talking about? How are we conveying it? And are we explaining it knowledgeably? Or when describing a product, are we just stating what's written on the user manual? Are we trying to become an incompetent technology editor by just conveying the information from the manual? Or very knowledgeable, with eyes closed, as soon as he touches a device, this has these features, ID has these features. These details of it are useful for us. Are we taking on the role of a narrator who says, dear listeners? These details are important. Of course, after this, we need to determine a format. Now, you might say, we've chosen a topic. What do you mean by format? Let me give you the details right away. Are you going to do a monologue, like I'm doing right now? In other words, are you going to talk to yourself and explain things like a madman? For example, the iPhone has these features. It was like this in the 11, like that in the 12, and we're expecting these in the 13. Are you going to do a monologue where you share your own comments, experiences, or information you've gathered from around? Or maybe your recording includes a friend sitting next to you. You might have a guest, someone well-versed in the field. Or a leading figure from a prominent sector. Are you going to host them? So, are you going to engage in a dialogue? Or, as some do, are you going to proceed solely with a Q&A format? People ask you questions, you research them or use your own knowledge and answered. Is that how you're going to do it? Or are you going to mix a little bit of everything? So, are you going to mix it up? Let's say I'm doing a bit of Q&A with you. Then let's say I asked an expert about the questions you asked. I engaged in a dialogue with them. Then I went to a fair, for example, a technology fair, and chatted with people there, and the work turned into both a Q&A, a monologue, and a dialogue. It progressed in this way. You might want to do this as well. In other words, you can more or less determine your broadcast format. You can even determine it according to the episode. Of course, just because you're doing a Q&A doesn't mean you have to do Q&A for 30 episodes. But let's talk about at least a single podcast. When you're about to start broadcasting, be prepared. This is very important. Then, unfortunately, when it gets to so, how are you doing? Things become boring. The next step. Now we've determined the format. We've decided on our title. Creating our content. In other words, the topics that come to mind for the work we'll be doing. Taking small notes on the titles of the content we will produce. Now I'm telling you something about the podcast flow. I have notes here. Was I going to talk about this? Wait, I was also going to talk about technology. Was I going to talk about the format? When was I going to talk about it? Like, you need to be organized in a way that won't confuse you or waste the listener's time. You already know this no matter what you do. When you see this as a job in the business world, working professionally and with discipline, the flow will progress excellently. So, what should we talk about here? How to make a podcast. I will talk about a relevant flow. I am preparing a podcast and here I am with you. There are steps regarding the microphone, light technology, where and how it will be broadcast, and in which settings, which technical settings it should be done. First, the sound will not be edited. It will be recorded first, like certain steps. If I don't write these down somewhere, when I'm explaining to you or to a student or giving a seminar, it would be like, oh, wait, there was this, and there was that, oh. Wait, let me explain this, but it was the third one. You think of it as the fourth one. If I speak like that, it would be all mixed up. Broadcast and content flow. That's why we need to determine those headings, the main headings. You are already knowledgeable about the sublines. In that regard, if I'm introducing a device, it's like explaining the main headings, to highlight important points so as not to skip the buttons on it. Again, while creating this content, There might be people we will chat with, or people we will have a Q&A with. Or there might be details we shouldn't skip. Make sure to write these down. I'm not saying you have to set up a prompter in front of you, but on this paper. Yes, I would like to pay attention to this detail here. It will be very important to specify the details. I get lazy about doing it in my broadcasts, but it actually needs to be done. Of course, like this. Have an intro and an outro. I mean, have an entrance and an exit because an entrance has come. It's clear you're about to start the broadcast. You said hello to people. And at the very end, the work is done, conversations, chats, podcasts, whatever the content is. It's finished and you press at the end. And with the intro, you now finish your broadcast with the outro as an exit. So our intro and outro are very important in podcasts. Suddenly saying, hello, I'm Sercan, let's get started. When we say we're starting the podcast, it can be a bit dull. I especially asked you to determine this. These are important when opening and closing our broadcast. Now we've prepared everything. What's left? Recording. We will record our show. Whether we're going to have a chat, do a Q&A, or if we're taking a call connection, we need to prepare these. We need to record all audio connections with the people involved. To avoid any disruptions and considering that there might not be a chance to redo the conversation, perhaps we should also take backup. We also need to get records. For instance, if one microphone is here, then on the other microphone, we might need to record from the other side as well. That depends on how meticulous you are or if you're confident there won't be any issues. Otherwise, if you recorded it directly and it's done, and you say you handled it without any issues, you can continue with the work. There's also this situation. You recorded your conversation. You recorded the content you would normally do for your show. There might be details on which you would like to comment. Record those as well so that there is a flow. You can start by talking about the topic, then talk to people, then comment on it, and finally, maybe bring it to a conclusion. That sequence is very important. After that, the editing process comes into play. I'm not talking about video. It's more for audio. The pops in our audio, the loud pops, the mouth noises, you know. Remove distracting details like a phone ringing, a notification coming in, a chair being pulled, someone calling you from above or below, or a cat meowing at that moment. At the same time, we had recorded things at different times. You know, like, one person's voice is here, another's voice is there, the sound of traffic is somewhere else, and people will listen with their headphones. They will listen with their speakers, or at least with the speakers of their phones or tablets. And in this situation, suddenly the volume goes up, goes down. Oh, it exploded here. It cracked there. These situations will make you unlistenable. Of course, by this point, you should have completely moved away from crackling, popping, and hissing sounds. I am the other, one with peas, crochet peas. Sounds like these. I'm referring to. In another step, we need to write our intro and outro. I mean, not in terms of music, by the way. So, what was the program we were going to do? What are we going to talk about? And I'll explain, in the outro, the details. Let's think of it this way. Now I'm going to do an impromptu broadcast. I'll actually make an introduction. Hello, welcome to the Technology Talks. Today's guest is Sercan. Sercan and I will discuss sound recording technologies and in broadcasts. How can we record better sound? We'll talk about these. That was an intro. Now, for the outro. Thank you all for listening and taking the time. Today's guest was our dear Sercan. How can we record our voice better, more efficiently, and with higher quality when recording a podcast? We talked about these. Thank you for listening. See you in the next broadcast with an outro like this. If we create our text, it's more fluent. So we've both provided information to the audience. And maybe you can use this in between. And at the end, we introduced our guest from the information we provided. Or we gave a brief summary of the other conversations we mentioned and made it ready. To take the broadcast outside, you can think of it like that. Our next step is music. Music is actually a bit subjective. Some listeners want to focus solely on the conversation without any music. Some say music. Very calm, very quiet. They think, wouldn't it be better if there was a very soft music underneath, as if we could hear it? That's what they think. It could be, of course. The music I just played at the beginning might have helped us start the broadcast more dynamically. Or maybe it was confusing, or perhaps it was an unnecessary detail. As I said, this is somewhat subjective, but we need to ensure that the music we use doesn't cause any copyright issues. We put in so much effort, we record and, or we got a copyright strike because of 10 seconds. What are we going to do? We won't be able to broadcast, or we'll have to cut and edit that part and deal with re-editing. We need to use it very carefully to avoid creating such a situation, and, normally, during the conversation, we should provide it as much as possible without disrupting the conversation too much. We need to adjust the levels. We need to be very careful about this. But if you want to add music, of course, it can be much more enjoyable. Maybe. Who knows? Let's say we finished our recording. We edited it, added the music, and so on. Now we are going to publish it on platforms. You know there are many platforms. We need to create a visual for this. That is, something that explains our topic and perhaps represents our channel. Whether it's our podcast channel or are we going to publish it on YouTube? Almost. It would be very appropriate to prepare a graphic that represents our platform, topic, and concept. Now we've prepared our visual. After that, we need to obtain that audio file as a single file because it consists of many parts, many audio sections. Introduction, speech, music in between, effects, maybe, applause, laughter, whatever you add. These are the conversations. We have arranged all of these nicely. We read the outro text, added the outro music, and prepared our post-production. After that, to upload it to platforms, it can be in MP3, or even WAV format for many of them. But there are many places that accept MP3. We converted it to MP3 and made it ready to publish. We formatted it for publishing. We finalized it for publishing on many platforms like Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Deezer. And we pressed publish, wrote the descriptions, created our title, and sent it. Now we've done our broadcast, we've shared it. What's next? Sharing it on mainstream social media accounts. We need to promote it to our followers on Twitter, those who follow us on Instagram, and our subscribers on YouTube so that our podcast attracts guests, they listen and subscribe. For future subscriptions, those broadcasts are already automatic. Fall into the programs of the devices they use. Already? Then they continue to listen. The important thing is for people to be able to access your audio stream. That's why audiograms have a significant impact here. So, what was an audiogram? These are square visuals, or if you prefer, of course, 16 by 9 rectangle within the shares. These are of our audio files. In a way that we can see the bass treble balance. Let me put a small example here right away. This, for instance, is very effective. It also attracts attention when sharing. But of course, having a good visual doesn't mean your audience will continuously grow. Doing it in series, which I cannot do, I admit it. Especially in the field of podcasts, making serial broadcasts and becoming aware of what you're actually talking about. Being proficient in these, mastering the topic, the guest, and the program, step by step in an exceptionally good way, turns you into a very good podcast broadcaster. But as I said, I'm mentioning the main topics again. Creating our title, determining our format, writing our content, preparing our intros and outros, making our recording, preparing the intro and outro sound, Music. Preparing these, adding or not adding our music, preparing our visuals. Doing our post-production, meaning finalizing all the data we have from start to finish, publishing. And sharing on the necessary platforms. When we don't break this chain, we create a nice flow in a serial manner. And you can be sure that you are taking the right steps towards becoming a very good broadcaster. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I have been helpful. Podcast, ing is a point I'm very sensitive about. Our sound quality needs to be good. We need to have control over the conversation. It's also very entertaining. A platform where we can magically create great content without the need for a camera to record us. A beautiful space. A powerful space. Be assured that this space will become much stronger in the future. Jump on this train before it leaves. I want us to travel together. Take very good care of yourselves. Goodbye. Stay healthy. Mr. What? I'm pressing it.